Welcome to Leatherbrain, the podcast for fantasy football. Now, introducing your host, Hunter Slapdog Amaruso, and Matthew Scotty Holtmeyer.
Hello, all you beautiful Brainiacs out there, and welcome into Leather Brains, your host, Slapdog. I am joined here today by my ever good friend, Yeti. It is a backwards hat kind of day. We're both rocking our team hats. They're backward. We're looking a little, I don't want to say crazy, because we're not looking crazy, but we're looking like we're gearing up here for something, Yeti.
See, we're looking towards the future. That's why our logos are in the back. We're Cardinals and Raiders fans, so we're just kind of looking past everything and we're looking forward.
That was a great save. I appreciate that. Yeah. Today, we have a lot to talk about today, Yeti. It is the free agency has started, so the free agency frenzy is here. We got to talk about it. And we got to talk about all of the implications for fantasy football, of course, but also just the implications for the NFL, because there is a lot of moving pieces. There are a lot of players that have moved on to other teams. Some players have come back to teams. Some players are going to the New York Jets. So there's a lot to talk about there. So we're gonna discuss that at great length as far as all of the things that have happened, and then we got a little bit of combine cleanup here. So before we get down to business, Yeti, we made a pact. We're not gonna say Schmerin Schmodgers. We're not gonna say his name. So I'm gonna say his name one singular time this whole podcast. Okay. For the rest of the time, he is thou who shall not be named, aka Lord Voldemort. So we will be referring to him as that for the entirety of this show, except one time I'm gonna say his name, but I'm not gonna do it right now.
Yeah,
so
clean out your mouth with soap right after you do it too.
I will. I have some Grey Goose here, and I'm just gonna swish it around in my mouth and swallow. So
5 o'clock somewhere, baby.
Amen. We ready to get down to business?
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Let's get down to business.
Well, Lord Voldemort. This is the biggest news. This is some of the biggest news in the NFL right now, and it has dropped somewhat recently. Lord Voldemort has stated that he will be going to the Jets. So I'm not surprised by this. I've been saying this for a while now. You know, he was on our radar as a top target for the Jets. And then last week, or actually, excuse me, earlier this week, he sent out a wish list of all the things that he wanted the Jets to do to acquire him. I'm frustrated. I'm so mad, Yeti. I'm so fucking mad. Baby. Can I go in? In? Is that okay?
Go
in.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Cook, man. Cook.
Fuck Aaron Rodgers.
Oh.
That's the only time I'm going to say his name, but fuck him. This man, I have been a very neutral party. I don't care about the Green Bay Packers. I don't care about him, so to speak. But what a fucking piece of shit. Not only does he own the Bears, he is still currently the starting quarterback for the Green Bay Packers. He also is the GM for the Jets. Yeti, it's insane. He sent the Jets
like the LeBron of the NFL, if you will.
Yeah, that's a good comparison, actually. Except he's not as good as LeBron.
True.
This man sent the Jets a list. He said, "I want you to basically take all my friends," and this is a verbal meme, and it's like the SpongeBob where they push the city over, like the entire city of Bikini Bottom. That's pretty much exactly what's happening. Is all the Packers are just moving to the Jets. So Alan Lazard, he got a 4-year, $44 million deal with the Jets. He was one of the people that Aaron Rodgers wanted. Aaron Rodgers also wants his tight end and his old ass wide receiver. That's a bum, and they're all terrible. He wants them to come to the Jets. So this man complained about how he had no weapons at Green Bay. He said, "I don't have any weapons here. This isn't good." And then he wants to take all of his weapons that he currently has on the Green Bay Packers and take them over to the Jets. So fuck him. This man is a homeless looking man who sits in a cave in the dark and does ayahuasca. He's lost his brain cells. Fuck him. Because I don't know how any player gets away with that. And he's currently getting away with it. And it's absolutely mind boggling to me. That's the end of my rant, Yeti. Go ahead with what you have to say.
What if this is just a sincere man that wants all of his friends to get paid in New York, you know?
No, look, if I was a friend of Aaron Rodgers, I'm happy right now because some of these players probably shouldn't even be in the league. Like that's that. Like they should probably be thinking about retirement instead, because Rodgers is who Rodgers is. He's not demanding, but pretty much like you need to get these guys over here if you want me to come over here. So
yeah, and one of those guys that he demanded was Alan Lazard, who actually signed a contract with the Jets already yesterday. 4 years, $44 million, which is kind of on par with what Jacoby Myers, who we'll talk about a little later, he got a similar contract to go to the Raiders. He was arguably the best wide receiver in this free agency class, which I know it's not very deep and it wasn't that great of a class, but he's still at the top and he got 11 mil a year basically. So Lazard, he's a good wide receiver, good blocking wide receiver, but in no way should he be getting $44 million to play with Aaron Rodgers in that offense.
No, and it begs the question, because obviously you got Garrett Wilson there, and Garrett Wilson is the wide receiver one on this team, and that does not change, in my opinion. I think it's very clearly still Garrett Wilson. The talent is there. We know that, right? This team is still with Aaron Rodgers coming there, it's still a huge improvement because their quarterbacks were Mike White, Joe Flacco, and Zach Wilson. So regardless, they're in a much better situation with Aaron Rodgers, in my opinion. But for fantasy football output, I think this kind of begs the question, what's up with Elijah Moore? Is Elijah Moore could he potentially be on the trade block or with the Jets, because there was some turmoil there last year. Now they signed Lazard they overpaid Lazard to this deal, and you have Garrett Wilson there. So is Elijah Moore the third wide receiver in this group? And maybe if they get the right price, they'll look to move on from him.
You know, I think it's possible that he could be one of those guys that is involved with the trade for he who shall not be named. But it's also entirely possible that they do hold on to Elijah Moore because he is on a rookie contract. He is cheap, and there's not that many good wide receivers out there right now. I mean, the top one is probably DJ Chark, who's going to command a little more money than what Elijah Moore is currently making. So in my mind, I think they have to roll with Elijah Moore because their current wide receiver room is Garrett Wilson, Lazard, wide receiver 2, and then Moore as a 3. And I think Moore is probably a better wide receiver than Lazard and will fit this. He gives another element to this offense, if you will. But what I'm interested in is if Garrett Wilson can. Well, we know he can produce because, you know, he produced with a list of shitty quarterbacks last year. But will Aaron Rodgers get on the same page with this young wide receiver early and often? Because Aaron Rodgers has a history of hyper-targeting his wide receiver 1. Devontae Adams, Jordy Nelson, Greg Jennings, you name it. Those guys all saw, 150 targets plus when they played with Aaron Rodgers. But they were also kind of molded into this offense. They weren't first-year guys in this offense. They were proven commodities in the NFL already. So I'm curious to what your thoughts are with Aaron Rodgers playing with somebody like a young guy like Garrett Wilson and Elijah Moore potentially.
I think there's a little bit of concern there, right? And the reason being is because, and I don't want to say concern, but like, it's not like a serious concern. The only thing that I think about in this entirety of this conversation is, what did he do last year with his rookies? Because he did have talent. Christian Watson is a talented wide receiver, and we kind of saw the spark of him at the end of the year, right? We got to see a little bit of what could be. He struggled with some injury during the year, so I understand that. But other than that, like the rumor mill is he's he was kind of off-putting. He didn't really want to care to help any of his young rookie wide receivers, which, by the way, there were quite a few. You have Romeo Doubs, you have Christian Watson, and then the backfield of who weren't rookies, but Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon, right? So I wanted to see him kind of be more of a mentor to them, and he wasn't. I don't know if that's necessarily going to have to be the case here. And something that's interesting to talk about as far as the Jets are concerned is who's their offensive coordinator now too. It's Mike LaFleur, right? So
with Green Bay or the Jets?
Or I'm sorry, the Jets.
Nathaniel
Hackett, who was his, I dropped the wrong name there, but who was his previous offensive coordinator, right? So he's got familiarity with him. I think Wilson is a really good play, to be honest with you, because I think he is the best person on this team offensively. at the wide receiver position. So I'm excited for, and if you own Garrett Wilson is a big buy for me. I think this offense is going to be explosive. I think it's going to be familiar to Aaron Rodgers in a lot of ways. And they have a lot of weapons around there. I'm not going to say Alan Lazard and Elijah Moore wide receiver ones, but they're not, they're a good supporting cast, right? Breece Hall should be coming back healthy. This should be a very productive offense, in my opinion. I am frustrated though, and it just frustrates me that he's able to get away with this, because nobody should be allowed to get away with this. And even Tom Brady didn't do this bullshit. And yeah, he brought Gronk down there, so to speak, but it was more of a, hey, Gronk, you want to come play down here? They needed a good tight end, so it fit. It was more of a natural fit. This is literally Lord Voldemort
slap
coming in. Yeah, this is Lord Voldemort coming in and saying, go get all my friends, pay him a shit ton of money, and let's play football. But they don't need a lot of those friends. You already have Tyler Conklin. What do you need his old tight end for? Just some of this shit it's perplexing to me. It's frustrating to me, because I don't think he should be allowed to get away with it. And if I was the Jets GM, I'd tell him to go fuck himself. But they're giving in to some of his conditions. And to me, that's a little frustrating to see.
And something that worries me with Aaron Rodgers bringing over some of his guys is, what if guys like Garrett Wilson and Elijah Moore, what if they don't pick up the offense as quickly as like an Alan Lazard, who's already played in this offense, has? That eventually eat into Wilson's target share at the beginning of the season? Maybe he starts off slow because he's just not understanding the playbook, or he's not on the same page as Aaron Rodgers. And I know they'll have all offseason and everything to get on the same page, but we have seen Aaron Rodgers get frustrated with these young guys when they aren't on the same page. I mean, he called out Romeo Doubs last year and Christian Watson when they weren't producing. How are these young guys going to respond?
And I think it's a great question. For me, Garrett Wilson is still of no concern. We saw Garrett Wilson get frustrated with his quarterback situation last year, and he was very vocal about that, and not to the point of like being an asshole, but Garrett Wilson had stated, like, I want the ball, throw me the ball. So I think he's hungry, and that to me excites me. I definitely see a little bit of skepticism there as far as maybe Alan Lazard could sneak into it, but from a talent perspective, it's got to be Garrett Wilson. So and I think it will be. I think it will be. It might take a couple weeks for things to click, but I don't believe that. I think it's going to be very quickly and clearly Garrett Wilson. But then, like I mentioned, you have Breece Hall, and I'm going to tell you right now, Yeti, Breece Hall is a better running back than Aaron Jones or AJ Dillon.
Yeah,
like the talent level that is there is on a different level. So I think this offense could look a little bit different in a lot of good ways for Aaron Rodgers as well. And traditionally they would have that 1-2 punch with both those guys, and now you have this all-encompassed guy. He just has to come back healthy, of course. So I'm excited for the Jets, and I have been excited for the Jets. And I've stated, I was talking about this last year. I said, once they get a quarterback, a comparable quarterback that is not named Zach Wilson, this offense is going to be really fun. And they already have a really good defense. Like the Jets, to me now, as long as Lord Voldemort does not fuck this up, the Jets are going to the playoffs. Like the roster is there for it. So
yeah. And while I'm kind of excited for Aaron Rodgers to go to the Jets, I do have some concerns, because we've seen veteran quarterbacks have success with going to other teams. Tom Brady to Tampa, Peyton Manning to Denver, Stafford to the Rams. But then we also have Russell Wilson, who went to Denver last year and shit the bed. Like, what are we actually going to get in the first year of Aaron Rodgers with the Jets? Because let's be real, Aaron Rodgers has a very, very short window. This dude is flirting with retirement every year. He said today on the Pat McAfee podcast that he was a 90% retired before his darkness retreat, which whatever the fuck he did in that darkness, I was going to say he saw the light, but all he did was see darkness. Right. But the window to win is extremely short with New York, and they are in a very competitive division with the Bills and Miami. What do you realistically expect from this team this season?
Like I said earlier, I don't know if they win the division. And I think a lot of the questions that come into this are, what do the offenses for the Bills and the Dolphins really haven't changed drastically. So defensively, that's where it's going to come into key for me as far as who's going to lead this division. Jets have they have a good defense, Yeti, and they really haven't lost any key elements to this defense. I think the Jets are contending for this. I do think the Bills probably still are the number one if they can stay healthy and they can bring back some of those key players that they could potentially lose here. But I still see the Jets in contention. I really do. The offense is probably lesser than the Bills or the Dolphins, but that's marginally. And the Jets still almost snuck in with what they had, and they didn't have a quarterback. So Jets to me are interesting. I like the Jets. I think if anything, they'll sneak in with a wild card play, but I fully expect the Jets to be in the playoffs this upcoming year.
And just for fun, for all of our DGen bettors out there, there are odds on the AFC East winners right now. Can you guess where the Jets are, 1 through 4?
I'd probably say 3.
They are actually number 2.
Really?
So the Bills are the first team at plus 115, and then the Jets are plus 220, with the Dolphins just behind at plus 350. So obviously Vegas is showing support for the Jets already. So it'll be interesting to see the situation kind of unfold over the offseason and obviously during the season.
Yeah, for sure. That was the newest thing to happen here, but something that happened last week that we have to talk about, it happened in between last week's episode and this week's episode, was the Bears. So the Bears last Friday, they traded the first overall pick, Yeti. So they are no longer holding the first overall pick. And I want to stop here before we continue. The Texans blew this so hard. There was one play that screwed them out of the first overall pick, and it was like a 4th and 19 touchdown that happened. And I just laugh at this because you look at this trade that the Bears did with the Carolina Panthers, who acquired the 101. And I'm like, dude, this could have been the Texans, but they screwed this up. Like Lovie Smith is a Bear. Like that's what he is. He
secretly like blew the front office kiss as he was on his way out of Houston.
Yeah, he had to have. So this trade, to me, in my opinion, the Bears fleeced the Panthers here. So if you live under a rock, the trade was the Bears give up the first overall pick. They trade down to the 9th overall pick. They get a second round pick this year. They get a second round pick next year. They get a first round pick next year. Oh yeah, and then the icing on the cake, they get DJ Moore, the wide receiver 1 for the Panthers. The Bears are a scary team, my friend. In my opinion, and I don't know if you agree with me, but the Bears easily won this trade. They walked away looking pretty damn good, in my opinion.
100%, man. I mean, they obviously get a first round pick this year, but then they'll also have 2 first round picks for next year. And like you said, they added DJ Moore on top of all that. So they didn't have to spend really any capital to get DJ Moore. This situation kind of feels a lot like the situation that happened with Philly last year, a couple years ago. Philly was going into last season before the draft. They had 2 first round picks in the 2022 draft. Jalen Hurts was one of those guys where it's like, okay, he's a good runner. We haven't seen him really develop. He had Devonta Smith and Dallas Goedert at tight end. And he looked okay as a passer, but they hadn't seen him take that next step as a passer. And they had 2 first round picks still. So there's a lot of speculation that the Eagles, they might trade up and they might get another quarterback to get, to compete with Jalen Hurts. But instead they got a wide receiver 1 and AJ Brown with one of their first round picks. Obviously we saw what Jalen Hurts this year. He exploded. Mm-hmm. Now Justin Hurts kind of in a similar situation. He did a lot of good things last year, but he also did a lot of Justin Fields. Yeah, Justin Hurts, same thing, whatever. He did a lot of good things last year, but he also did a lot of bad things last year. So how is he going to look with an actual wide receiver 1? We're going to label him right now, wide receiver 1, DJ Moore. How is he going to produce? Because if he doesn't produce, the Bears have 2 first round picks next year. And that looks a little scary for Fields if he doesn't produce.
I think this is a shit or get off the pot moment for Fields, but I truth be told, I'm super excited for Justin Fields. I am not a Bears fan, but I think the Bears are in a really, really good spot now. They've signed some big name defensive players, so they're shoring that up. David Montgomery is no longer in the picture, so Khalil Herbert is looking like their running back 1. Offensively, their weakest positions right now are their offensive line, and if they can hit on some of those guys in the draft, like I think that they probably will, and shore up some positions on that O-line, this could be a very, very good offense. And I love the analogy that you use here, that it's kind of like Eagles-esque in a lot of ways. And you look at the situation as far as the quarterback roles here, they're very similar in a lot of ways. Jalen Hurts is a prototypical running quarterback, much like Justin Fields, and we saw what he unlocked this last year with his feet. What we wanted to see out of Jalen Hurts last year was, can he throw the ball? I think he can. We saw that this year. We saw him airing the ball out, and it looked good. He looked really good. Justin Fields, same exact situation. We know he can run the ball. Can he throw the ball? I think this is a really good opportunity to showcase that. And if you give him an offensive line that can buy him just a little bit more time so he can make his checks and do his reads, you now have a wide receiver one in DJ Moore. Is A.J. Brown better than DJ Moore? Yeah, he is. But DJ Moore is still a really good wide receiver. And you look at DJ Moore's tenure with the Panthers, the man had nothing. DJ Moore had nobody. He was going through different quarterbacks every single year, typically putting up over 1,000 yards every single year, and was still putting up, for fantasy football purposes, pretty usable numbers. He didn't have a wide receiver too. He had a different quarterback. He was in a different offensive system every single year, and he still was able to do those numbers. So I am in the belief that DJ Moore is actually, he's a buy for me in Dynasty. Depending upon where his ADP is at next year, I'm very excited to own him. But I think Bears fans should be very, very excited about this opportunity, because not only does DJ Moore coming there affect DJ Moore's output for fantasy football, but you look at it like this. Cole Kmet was the leading targets, receiver, and touchdown catcher for the Bears. This opens up the field for all of these other players on this field. You had Velus Jones last year. Like you had a bunch of nobodies.
Put some respect on his name.
Sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah, that wasn't very kind. But for Cole Kmet owners, this is actually really, really enticing as well, because it opens up the field. Darnell Mooney, I think, is in a much better situation. I'm not trying to take anything away from Mooney, but he's not a wide receiver one. He's a complimentary wide receiver two. And if you get a really talented guy to be able to open up the field, you can spread the ball around, make your checkdowns. And I truth be told, man, I am super excited for this Bears organization. I think that they are a team to look out for this year.
Yeah, I honestly agree with you, man. And I think the addition of DJ Moore is so big, because last year we saw Justin Fields excel in the area where DJ Moore is targeted the most. So in DJ Moore's 5-year tenure with Carolina, his average depth of target was 12 yards. Last year, when Justin Fields was targeting a wide receiver in the 10 to 19 yard range, he had a 67% completion rate there. He just wasn't throwing it there enough because they didn't have enough talent. Mm-hmm. They had Cole Kmet, who was getting everything under 10 yards, and then Darnell Mooney, who the fuck knows? He missed majority of the season, but Darnell Mooney is a complementary piece to what DJ Moore can do in this offense. Absolutely. So like you mentioned, we've seen quarterbacks like Jalen Hurts. We've seen Tua, Josh Allen, Dak Prescott. They all took a huge step in year 3 because they got a proven wide receiver. So I'm excited to see Justin Fields take another step with DJ Moore in this offense. And, if they can shore up their offensive line a little bit, like you said, whether it's free agency or in the draft, I think we might be looking at a team that's flirting with a wild card spot.
I think that is a very accurate statement, especially with the division changing, obviously, with Lord Voldemort leaving and whatnot. So the Bears could be a very frisky team. And for fantasy football purposes, Justin Fields is definitely somebody to try and grab at one of those earlier rounds, because as we know, quarterbacks who run the ball, they typically get you a little bit more fantasy points. So I'm excited for what, he has proven that. He's proven he can do that. I'm sure that's not going to change, but it might change as far as, okay, now he has some weapons, so he doesn't have to run the ball 200 yards a game, So I'm excited for him, excited for the Bears. And I think that for fantasy purposes, they are all pretty sexy. So you did mention this, though. You mentioned if the Bears, they have 2 first-round picks next year. So, if they don't do well this year, do they draft a quarterback like Caleb Williams or Drake May? I'm in the camp that they don't, because I do think Justin Fields is going to take that step. So they're not going to have to do that. That's my opinion. I think we're going to see Justin Fields take that next step with some help there. So I don't know what your thoughts are. I'd be curious.
I'm in the same boat as you. I think Justin Fields, he did a lot of good things last year, but he just didn't have the help to really take the next step. He was scrambling for his life every play, didn't have any competent wide receivers. Not no disrespect to Claypool or Vilas or Pringle, but they aren't an elite wide receiver for Justin Fields to produce. Now that he has DJ Moore, I'm excited to see him take that next step. And if for some reason he doesn't, having those 2 first-round picks next year is going to be huge for them, because, like you had mentioned, Caleb Williams and Drake May, 2 highly sought-after quarterbacks for next year's class. Those 2 guys would be the first 2 picks in this year's draft if they were available. So I think that the Bears, Allen, or one of our members here at Leather Brains, he had made a point that he thinks that none of the quarterbacks in this year's draft are better than Justin Fields, and I agree. But I think Drake May and Caleb Williams could be, if Justin Fields does not produce this
doesn't
year.
get it done. And it, like we mentioned, they showed up their defense, and the Bears were in a really good spot walking into this. They had one of the most NFL team friendly cap spaces as far as what they're able to do. So they signed Tremaine Edmonds, linebacker, and TJ Edwards. They signed a defensive end and DeMarcus Walker. So the defense is great. They signed a guard and Nate Davis. So they spent big money. They are expecting good things from these players, and they should get it. But let's flip the script here, Yeti. Let's talk about the Panthers, because the Panthers spent all of this for the first overall pick. Everybody and their mother was laughing at them because they're like, dude, you got fleeced here, which I'm in that camp. I think they did.
Mm-hmm.
But then the Panthers came out afterwards and they said, we're not willing to get, we're willing to sell this pick if anybody's interested. Here's my thoughts. What in the fuck is going on in the Panthers organization? Because you sold the farm, so to speak. Your best offensive asset you have left is DJ Moore. You gave him 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks. In my mind, you know what you want. Like, you're willing to spend copious amounts of money because you want to go get your guy. So then for you to come out and say, hey, we're still interested in selling this thing. That's like, what are you expecting to get in return for what you sold to get this?
It's a Raiders move right there if I've ever seen one.
It was completely asinine, in my opinion. I laughed very hard when I had heard about that. And honestly, I feel bad for... I don't think the Panthers end up selling this because they're not going to get the return on investment that they sold to get it. But I feel bad for whatever quarterback goes there, because we're talking about a hard rebuild, Yeti. Like, that is where they're at. Adam Thielen, he's now a free agent. He was mentioned to go over and visit with the Panthers. They're just not in a good spot, man. They are in a really tough spot. Doesn't have a lot of weapons there. It's a very bleak future for whatever quarterback goes there at this current time.
Yeah, it's worth noting that Hayden Hurst did sign a 3-year deal with them this year, today, I think, or yesterday. But it's still, who do they have at wide receiver? Receiver like Laviska Shenault is their best wide receiver as we speak right now.
Hayden Hurst will probably, at this current juncture, is probably the best pass catcher they have.
Top 10 tight end next year.
It very well could be, because he might be the only person that's able to catch a ball. So it's not a good spot.
It's funny.
How Frank Reich, I don't know how he navigates these next couple years.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Panthers thought they could strong arm the league and being like, hey, we have the first pick. Like, what are you going to give us for it? But now everybody's just kind of looking at them like, what the fuck are you thinking? Like, I don't think they really had a good game plan. They were just trying to they overpaid for the first round pick. They probably realized it, and now they're probably like, okay, what the fuck can we recoup in order to get weapons on the field? Because right now we look like a JV team that's about to play, 17 varsity teams.
Very much so. And they're not in a good spot. So we'll move on here. I want to talk about the Broncos here for just a little bit. So
all right, just threw up a little bit.
I know it's not a good conversation, but we got to do it. We got to talk about them. The Broncos have not done anything insane. As we mentioned on last episode, they are not out on potentially selling Cortland Sutton if the price is right. Realistically, I don't think they're going to get what they probably want for him. So I think Cortland Sutton will be wearing a Broncos jersey next year. But what they did do, Yeti, is they got 2 new offensive linemen. So they got Mike McGlinchey and Ben Powers. They spent quite a bit of money, but they shored up some offensive line help for Mr. Unlimited. So what are your thoughts?
I think this is obviously the right thing to do for Denver, because Russ was on the move a lot last year. And as we saw, Russ has kind of lost a step in his game, or at least he did last year. He looked very sluggish, but this gives him a little bit more protection with they spent $78 million on those 2 offensive linemen. So hopefully they can produce, obviously, for Russ and keep him upright. And in our group chat, I know I joked about throwing up a little bit about Denver, but in our group chat, I did mention that I do think Denver is going to be the 2nd seed in the AFC West this year, just because their defense last year was very good for them. They probably would have been close to a wild card last year if Russ was 75% of his normal self. But now they're adding more pieces to the defense. They're adding some more pieces on offense to help keep Russ upright. And I think this offense is going to look a little bit different with Sean Payton running the show. So I think this team could make some noise next year in the AFC West, unfortunately.
I agree with you. I think there's everybody wants to shit on Russell Wilson, and I understand that. He looked absolutely terrible last year. I don't want to blame it all on Russ. I think he shares his fair share, but I think Nathaniel Hackett also carries a brunt of that, because I think Hackett wanted to come in and run that offense very similar to when he was with the Packers, and that offense is not the same. It doesn't have the same players. It doesn't have the same archetype of talent on that team. So Sean Payton, I think, is going to get the best out of these players. I expect Russell Wilson and all of the Broncos players involved to be much better than they were last year. And the Raiders, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, I don't see them doing very well this year. They could make a splash, but I think 2nd is a realistic goal for the Broncos in this division. So I like that take quite a bit. We'll pivot over to Atlanta. So Atlanta, this is kind of an interesting thing that I think a lot of people will start with the tight end Jonnu Smith. And I think this is pretty interesting here because they traded a 7th round pick to the Patriots to acquire Jonnu Smith. So there's a lot of speculation going around and a lot of talk about why would they do this. They already have Kyle Pitts, who is an athletic specimen in and of itself. Is this a concern for Kyle Pitts owners with Jonnu Smith coming in here? Because throughout years past, Jonnu Smith has been not a very great pass blocker, so to speak. He's been more of a pass catching tight end. So is there concern? Should we hit the panic alarm for Kyle Pitts owners? Is there a world in which they can both live in? What are you thinking?
So I had to dig into the stats a little bit to see what the fuck Atlanta was doing, right? Because this was a little like, it was a big head scratcher because Jonnu, he has a big contract right now. And it looked like the Patriots were just going to, ship him off as a salary casualty. But surprisingly, Atlanta ran the most 2 tight end sets last year with Kyle Pitts and Parker Hesse. Parker Hesse is more of a pass or a run blocker, if you will, but they also sprinkled in a couple of other tight ends to play with Kyle Pitts. So while it may seem like a shock initially, I think this is exactly what the offense is trying to do. They'll have Kyle Pitts lined up on one side and they'll have Jonnu lined up on the other side. Maybe do some more play actions and get Desmond Ridder a little more comfortable on some play action type things, get him on some bootlegs, just get him on the move, because that's what he did the best in college. That's where he was at his best, when he was rolling out. So I'm not freaking out about Kyle Pitts. Now, obviously, it might dig into his target share just a smidge, but let's be real. Like, Kyle Pitts, he's a freak. This dude, if he returns to his old self coming off MCL surgery, this dude is one of a kind tight end, and we just need to be a little patient with Kyle Pitts.
I agree with you. I don't think I would be hitting the panic button. I think if anything, this does, like you mentioned, help Desmond Ridder quite a bit. But this does leave a vacancy with the Patriots here. Hunter Henry is now really the big name tight end for the Patriots. He was pretty quiet this last year. The year previous, I want to say he was in the top 10, but this last year he was a little bit quieter. Do you think this makes him more of an attractive option in New England?
I think so. Tight ends are such a volatile position in fantasy, so I'm not going to sell Hunter Henry to you, but I do think he's going to be one of those guys that we talk about as a streaming option. And I have a stat for you. So in games that Jonnu Smith played at least 50% of the snaps, Hunter Henry averaged 2.5 targets a game. In games where Jonnu Smith played less than 50% of the snaps, Hunter Henry saw 5.5 targets a game. So his targets went up quite a bit. This offense is obviously going to look a little different after Matt Patricia's experiment kind of failed there. So Hunter Henry he's an interesting prospect for me going into redraft, and I'm not going to sell the farm and dynasty leagues for him. But if I can get him for a late round pick, like a third round pick, I'm looking to do so right now.
I think that's a fair assessment. Before we move on from Atlanta, though, we have to talk about quarterback Taylor Heinicke. The Stinky Heine, as some are calling him. Taylor Heinicke signed a 2-year, $20 million deal. So there are some people out there that are very, who's going to be the quarterback? What's going to happen? I don't know here. I'm going to tell you what's going to happen, Yeti. I'm just going to be completely honest with you. There. Desmond Ridder is the starting quarterback for the Falcons. I have been stating that for a very long time, and it has not changed. Even the Falcons came out and they said, "Hey, look, Desmond Ridder is going to be our guy." But I think this is a really interesting move here, and I'm gonna kind of delve into why. This is a smart move by the Falcons because I'm going to tell you right now, they're going to know probably midway through the season if Desmond Ridder is their guy or not. And because that entire division is in a rough place, maybe the Falcons could even shoot up and have a spot at taking the division because it is in such bad health. So them getting Taylor Heinicke, I think, is more of an insurance piece to say, okay, if Ridder ends up not being our guy, we have somebody that we can use that is of a similar archetype as Ridder. And so we won't have to change the offense drastically to make this guy work in our offense. Like you mentioned, Ridder is somebody who he likes to use his feet and extend plays and stuff like that, which is great. Taylor Heinicke is that guy as well. He was just with the Commanders last year, and I'm not saying Heineke's great, but I think he's a great backup asset for them to have, because if they're in the same situation again next year and they have an early first round pick, they're probably going to take a quarterback. So this is Ridder's year to figure out, can we build around him and can he be our guy? And if not, we need to look for the draft. We have Heinicke as an insurance piece, and that's my thought on it. I don't know if you share that same sentiment.
Yeah, I do think the option to draft a quarterback for Atlanta is still very much on the table. And while I'm not saying that quarterback is going to come in and replace Desmond Ridder, I think this is more of a competitive move for Atlanta, saying, if you can't get the job done this year, we have Taylor Heinicke, who is a proven starter in this league. He's not very good, but he's started a few games for the Commanders. If you don't perform, we're going to put in Taylor Heinicke, or we're going to put in this rookie to, who might be better than Heinicke. Who knows who they're going to take there in the draft, right? But I think it's just kind of to light a fire under Ridder. And I think a lot can still happen for Atlanta. I do think Ridder will most likely be the day one starter, barring a trade with Baltimore, but that kind of looks unlikely at this point, right?
Yeah.
But
I don't think I think Lamar stays home with the Ravens.
Yeah. My big question for you with Taylor Heinicke signing with Atlanta is, what the fuck does Washington do?
That is something I have been trying to figure out for quite a while. I'm going to be completely honest, because I don't know what they do. Like, what is it? Sam Howell is currently their QB1 right now. So The free agent market is certainly dwindling for some quarterbacks. We have, and we'll talk about it a little bit more. Baker Mayfield's now with the Bucks. You have Jimmy G, who's now signed with the Raiders. Derek Carr has been parked with the Saints. So like some of these bigger named free agent quarterbacks are no longer in contention. There's a couple that are like your quote unquote filler quarterbacks that I could still see making a splash down there. And somebody that comes to mind is Jacoby Brissett. He still has not signed anywhere. As a Cardinals fan, I would love for him to come down there and fill in Kyler's absence. But, and I think that is a possibility. I have stated that before. Perhaps he goes to the Commanders for the year and they try and work with what they've got. And, maybe next year draft a quarterback if they can. I don't know. I don't know what the Commanders do because right now Sam Howell I don't think he's the guy. Certainly a shitty situation for Eric Bieniemy to sign up for when he's going from the best quarterback in the NFL to whatever that team is. So I don't know. I don't know what they do. I'm interested to see what they do. I still think they'll probably sign a quarterback. Tyler Huntley is another quarterback, and he's a Pro Bowl quarterback. Mm-hmm. We know Tyler Huntley is probably one of the best right now. I mean, he could go there, right? So there's still some guys who could go there. I think at this point, if you're just looking at it from a straight shooter perspective, Jacoby Brissett is probably one of the top quarterbacks left to go in and kind of fill in. It's
Brissett, Teddy Bridgewater, Marcus Mariota, and Carson Wentz. Those are really the only quarterbacks worth noting that are.
Which one like if you had to pick which one you had to have for the Raiders to start this year, which one would you take?
The Raiders to start?
Correct. Like if you had to pick one of these for your team to go in and start week 1 between those 4, who were you taking?
Brissett. Okay. I think Brissett is easily the best out of the bunch, and then I'd probably play Teddy, and then Marcus, and then Wentz. But
yeah, Marcus has already been there. He knows what the Raiders are like. Okay, before we move on to our next team, I do just want to stop real quick and talk about March Gladness. This is our free. I love you jumping in on that. We're giving away free signed NFL jerseys, everybody. So if you are not aware, you need to go get yourself aware. Go follow us over on Twitter because we are giving away free signed NFL jerseys every week of March. Free NFL signed jerseys.
Free.
Very easy to get subscribed or not subscribed. Get entered into the giveaway. So this week we are giving away a free signed DJ Moore jersey. It is a Panthers jersey, so it is not a Bears jersey where he will end up, but it's a free jersey. And all you got to do is just make sure you are subscribed to us on YouTube and you retweet our pinned tweet. It's very easy to get entered. And make sure you turn on our tweet notifications because we are giving away another free signed NFL jersey next week. So we still got 2 more jerseys after this DJ Moore one. Please make sure you are keeping your eye out because there's some good jerseys coming down the pipeline here for all you Brainiacs. So go check it out. Yeti, let's talk about your team, baby. We're gonna jump right into the Raiders here. So
no, I need a shot or something before we talk about them.
This was one of the spots that Aaron Rodgers had. I just said his name. Dear Jesus, I'm sorry for I have sinned. Lord Voldemort was mentioned to possibly be wearing a Raiders uniform next year. This was one of the murmurs of a landing spot. Very obviously, we do now know that he's going to the Jets. Before the news of him going to the Jets came out, the Raiders signed Jimmy G to a 3-year, $67 million contract. So, Yeti, as our resident Raiders fan, what is your thoughts about this?
I would just like to hold a moment of silence for all Raiders fans. So if we could just, nod, close our eyes. All right. Amen.
Amen.
What we heard was the hope of any Raiders success this year fucking flying out the damn window, man. Oh my God. All right. So I'm going to try to put my bias aside as best as I can for this segment, but man, it's going to be a rough year for the Raiders. I don't need to be an expert to tell you that. It's going to be very rough. And while I have been very vocal about the Raiders signing Jimmy G, saying that, if the Raiders don't sign Aaron Rodgers, the most likely candidate for the Raiders would be Jimmy G. The only reason why I said that is because I thought he would be an inexpensive quarterback, kind of a bridge quarterback, if you will, for the future. And because he obviously knows the system. He's played in it before. He started 2 games with the Patriots. He's been under Josh McDaniels for a couple years in New England. He just knows how to run everything. But instead, they pay him, mid-tier starting quarterback numbers in the $67.5 million range, right? He signed it 3 years, not a year or 2-year filler. It's a 3-year guaranteed contract. And I just kind of have to wonder, like, what the fuck the front office was thinking when they decided to replace Derek Carr, when they decided to bench Derek Carr. Like, it almost makes you wonder if when they benched Derek Carr, if they thought they had Tom Brady in the bag at that point. Because if you go into this offseason and you're thinking, okay, we're going to get rid of Derek Carr and then we're going to sign Jimmy G. Boom. Problem solved. Like, you're a fucking idiot.
So just to be clear, this is a downgrade from Derek Carr, in your opinion?
Yes, I do think this is a significant downgrade from Derek Carr as a quarterback. And I know Jimmy G is a much cheaper version of Derek Carr. Derek Carr was owed, I believe, $66 million more in guaranteed money than Jimmy G at this point. So Jimmy G is a little bit cheaper than Derek Carr.
Yeti, I don't want to interrupt you here, and I apologize for this, but we do have some breaking news. Quarterback Jacoby Brissett is expected to sign with the Washington Commanders. So I do just
right on cue.
I
We
just wanted
spoke
to
it
throw
into
that out there.
existence,
I know
man.
we are very, very talented NFL analysts, and we're also handsome. And
You're welcome,
we're,
Jacoby.
Yeah, I think we should get a part of that contract. So I just wanted, I apologize for interrupting you there, but I did just want to throw that out there because it's quite odd timing. So
yeah. Like I was saying, with Derek Carr versus Jimmy G is obviously cheaper than Derek Carr at this point. And I get that Jimmy G knows the offense a little bit better than Derek Carr might have, but Derek Carr would have been going into a second year in this offense. The team chemistry, the locker room was all behind Derek Carr. And you just completely blow it up. Like, I feel like Josh McDaniels and Ziegler, who's the GM, they just came into the Raiders thinking, we're going to fucking dismember this team and we're going to divide the fan base. Because I feel like it depends on what Raider fan you talk to. Some Raider fans are like, oh, we're going to be the Patriots of the West. And some Raider fans are like, fuck Ziegler, fuck McDaniels. Like, I'm in the camp of fuck those guys, because what they're trying to do is exactly what Matt Patricia tried to do with Detroit, and he ran that team into the fucking ground. He's trying to bring in guys that fit his system instead of adapting to the guys that he already has. And you see what they are doing. They are signing every fucking Patriot player and their mom, who is a free agent. They signed Jacoby Myers to a 3-year, $33 million contract. They signed what's his name? They signed a wide receiver that's a speedster. I can't remember his name right now.
He was from the Patriots. Right?
Yeah. They just signed him overnight. Yeah. But they're bringing guys over that have played in this Patriot system. They know the Patriot way that McDaniels is trying to, fucking preach onto Raider fans. But it just doesn't make any sense to me, man.
I'm gonna spin zone this. I'm not gonna say this is gonna happen, but I'm trying to provide my good friend Yeti with some promise of future. Raiders have the 7th overall pick, and there is a chance that one of these top 4 quarterbacks could potentially be there. Like, do you not think that they might grab that, and that's their intent, is to grab one of these quarterbacks and maybe have Jimmy G cook for this year and then see what they have in this guy next year potentially? Is that like off the table for you as a thought?
I don't even trust this front office, man. So if you were to tell me that they were going to take one of the 4 quarterbacks that's going to be available, they'll probably take the 6th best available quarterback. Honestly, they'll take a guy who was supposed to get drafted in like the 5th round with that 7th pick. In all honesty, though, if they were to take a quarterback and they stayed at the 7th spot, you're probably looking at Will Levis or Anthony Richardson at that point, right? And I don't think we'll talk about this a little bit later, but I think both of those guys are going to be busts in the NFL, and I would rather save that pick for next year because it's pretty obvious that the Raiders are going to suck this year. I think we are in a tank status.
Yeah, I don't know though, because I mean you signed Jacoby Meyer to this deal, which is as soon as this happened, one of the first things I went to our team chat and I said, does Devontae Adams get traded here? Because while you're probably not going to see immense value for him like you would like, he's still a top tier wide receiver. He is aging, right? But you could get something in return for him. You signed Jacoby Meyer. You already have Hunter Renfrow. You have Darren Waller. The news comes out about 25 minutes later that Darren Waller has been traded to the Giants, right? For a 3rd round pick. And initially you were upset by this. I think that was a good move. To be honest with you, I think that was a good move. And I think maybe it sounds like per our conversations before we got on this podcast, your mentality towards this has changed slightly. But when I heard this I'm bipartisan here. I'm not a Raiders fan, not a Giants fan. But I look at this from the Raiders' perspective. Yes, they could have gotten a 2nd round pick for him last year from the Packers. They should have done that last year, but they didn't, right? And we can't go back and we can't change time. But what we can do is look at, okay, Darren Waller has not been healthy the last 2 years either. And this last year, you can't bank on injury. You don't know if it's going to happen or not, but history has shown he has struggled. He's getting older. He's an aging asset and he is struggling to stay healthy. Is he talented when he's on the field? Absolutely. But he's not on the field a lot, right? So if you can still get a 3rd round pick for Darren Waller, I think that's fair. And the tight end market in this upcoming draft is really spicy. So I think you guys could replenish what you lost with him anyway. But I think that was a really, really smart move for the Raiders. Yeah, they should have done it last year, but they didn't, right? So they still got decent return on their value for him. And I think now I don't know what this offense looks like. I've never been a fan of Jimmy G. He is the sexiest man in the NFL. I will say that. But for football purposes, I've never really been a huge fan of him. He worked in his last system because Kyle Shanahan is a systematic guy. We've talked about that at nauseum. But so he didn't need to be great. I don't think he has a spectacular arm. I don't think he's great at making reads. And so I don't know where this offense goes, but this offense does have weapons still, right? Josh Jacobs came back, so that's a positive sign for you guys. Currently, you still do have Devontae Adams, Hunter Renfrow, and Jacoby Myers, and that's a good wide receiver group. So the quarterback I don't love. I don't love Jimmy G going there, but that's where you're at. That's what we're dealing with. I could see them taking a quarterback this year, and maybe that's their game plan. I don't know. But I mentioned Darren Waller. Do you think Darren Waller's fantasy football value goes up at all with him going to the Giants now?
With him going to the Giants, he immediately becomes, I know he's a tight end, but he immediately becomes their wide receiver 1, which is what he was with the Raiders for those 2 years that he really exploded, right? Like the Raiders, they were trying to figure out who their wide receiver was. Was it Henry Ruggs? Was it going to be Hunter Renfrow? But it was Darren Waller. He was a guy who really stood out, and I think he's going to have to do that again for the Giants. We saw Daniel Jones last year. He improved quite a bit thanks to Brian Dable. And I think Brian Dable is going to game plan a lot of targets for Darren Waller, as he should, because when Darren Waller's on the field, he is a Pro Bowl talented tight end. He is a very good tight end. The only issue is, can he stay on the field?
And you mentioned that. You look at it like this. So Giants traded Kadarius Toney to the Chiefs for a 3rd round pick, and then the Giants purchased Darren Waller for a 3rd round pick. So they essentially Darren Waller for the most part, right? I think it's going to be interesting which one stays on the field longer, because Kadarius Toney had the same issues, right? I mean, that was their biggest qualm with him, aside from maybe some locker room stuff that was going on, was he wasn't on the field a lot due to injury. Can Darren Waller stay on the field any longer than Kadarius Toney? I will say I was pretty sad to see this for those that own Daniel Bellinger, the rookie tight end from last year for the Giants. He at one point was kind of their only pass catcher. He was doing really well. But just a humorous little tidbit. There was an NFL analyst who wrote an article about Waller now being the best pass catcher in New York for the Giants. And Daniel Bellinger's dad got into this guy's DMs and was spamming him for 4 hours, reaming this analyst for stating that Waller was better than Bellinger. So I just thought that was funny. Wanted to share that. But Waller very clearly is an upgrade for Bellinger. And I think for those who own Bellinger, I'm not saying drop him by any stretch of the means, because we do know Waller has issues struggling to stay healthy, and Bellinger was used last year. But it certainly took a toll for him for that aspect. I do think his fantasy football output does go up. I think it has to. My only concerns, as we've been talking about, is just him being on the field. So, other than that, is there anything else we want to cover on your team, or do you have any more?
You did ask me if I think Devontae Adams is going to be on the move because Darren Waller's gone. We have Jacoby Myers in there now. And the answer to that question is I think he is going to be on the team for most of the season. I think once the Raiders realize they're kind of out of contention, that they try to move Devontae Adams because they're going to try to get as much value as they can from him, right? Mm-hmm. So I think he starts the year on the team, but he's eventually gone. The Myers signing was a little head scratching to me because Hunter Renfrow, he's traditionally the slot guy in this offense. Last year, he played about 70% of his snaps in the slot. That's where Jacoby Myers plays about 65% of the time, so it's kind of weird. But I try to reason it as McDaniels. He's trying to bring the Julian Edelman / Danny Amendola type of offense maybe to the Raiders. I don't know. I'm trying to put a positive spin on it because I've been so negative about it, but it's just hard for me to game plan what the fuck McDaniels and Ziegler are doing. But that's kind of how I could see them working together. But then again, it's hard because you have an alpha and Devontae Adams on the outside. So it'll be interesting to see this offense unfold.
Yeah, it will. And I don't think it's going to be sparks or flying, but it will be interesting. I do agree with you. Before we move on, we're going to talk about the quarterback migrations that have happened thus far. I just want to state this, dude. I don't know if it was like a fever dream or what the hell happened. I woke up very early to go to work, and I grabbed my phone and I'm looking at it, and I see that like it was the Chiefs traded to get DeAndre Hopkins. And I saw a Photoshop of it happening and them signing him to a 3-year deal. And I'm like, oh my God. And I got an iPhone, right? And so I saw like the little tidbit of the headline and like a little tiny picture. And I'm like, no way, this is insane. And then I set my phone down for a second, or I clicked the app and it said no longer available. And then I was like, what the heck? So I'm scrolling all over media outlets trying to see if this is real. I don't know what the hell I saw. And I could never find it again. So if it happens, I think I can see the future, and I just want to throw that out there. I do hope DeAndre Hopkins finds a new home. It sounds like it's probably the Patriots, but Chiefs that'd be fun. So I just wanted to throw that out there. But the quarterback migration, now that we are going to talk about, the Bucs, they signed Baker Mayfield, of all quarterbacks, to a 1-year, $8.5 million deal. I think the question at hand is Kyle Trask a better quarterback than Baker Mayfield?
I think that remains to be seen, right? I mean, there was reports that came out about Kyle Trask, I think right before the season ended, that Kyle Trask just hasn't performed at all in practice. Like he hasn't really made any steps since his rookie year, which, okay, maybe this dude is a backup in the NFL. Like maybe he's just partying all the time and he's letting Tom Brady do his thing. I don't know.
A real Blue Mountain State hero.
Yeah. But I mean, you have to give Kyle Trask a chance, right? Like we know what Baker Mayfield can do. And while he looked rejuvenated under the Rams, how much of that was actually Sean McVay's approach to Baker Mayfield?
I agree. I think especially given currently at this moment, Chris Godwin and Mike Evans are still there. Do you know how pissed off they're going to be if they have Baker Mayfield as a quarterback because he can't throw the ball?
They're both going to be gone.
They're going to be like, that locker room is going to be in serious turmoil if he's their quarterback, in my opinion, because both those guys seem like guys who they'll put up with it for the first couple weeks and then they're just going to come unglued and be like, fuck this. If they still end up with the Bucs, I would love to see them find new homes. But realistically, like that's where my mind is at. I'd rather give Kyle Trask a start. He's young. You've had Tom Brady behind him. let the guy at least get a shot here. We know what Baker Mayfield is, and it's nothing great. So give Kyle Trask a thought. But I think this is probably going to come down to a battle at camp, a battle at preseason camp as far as who's going to win that spot. I think that's probably what it's going to come to, unfortunately. Who would have thought the trajectory of Baker Mayfield going into talking about him last year as he signed with the Panthers versus what has transpired now? Wow,
he's been with 4 teams in the past year.
Yeah, it's nuts. Speaking of a quarterback who kind of hops around, Andy Dalton, he signed a 2-year, $10 million deal with the Panthers. So I don't know if they let their rookie just start. Realistically, I feel bad for anybody who's on this Panthers team at this point. I think it probably should be the rookie. Andy Dalton was not great with the Saints this last year. And man, I mean, maybe I hope he's a backup. I don't know if they let him start and try and work the rookie in. But I think you might as well just throw your rookie in and just say, hey, look, we know we're going to suck, but let's just get you reps. Like, that's where my mind is.
I actually kind of like the signing because it's fairly cheap, $10 million over 2 years. That's pretty much nothing for Andy Dalton at this point. And I think you can put Andy Dalton in to start the season at least for 4 or 5 weeks, let him kind of do his thing and let a rookie develop underneath him. Like, I think Andy Dalton, I don't personally know him, but he looks like a guy that would be helpful,
I mean, Fields said that. Like, when he was with the Bears, Fields was very in media outlets and stuff like that, was very vocal about he was super helpful. So
right. So I think it's going to be beneficial for a rookie quarterback to learn behind a veteran like Andy Dalton. And so I do like the signing. While it's not relevant for fantasy, I think for real life football, it's nice. Just because he is a knowledgeable guy who's apparently very helpful for rookie quarterbacks. So whoever goes there is going to have somebody's brain to pick, which is great for a new guy in the NFL at the hardest position in the league. So I like it. Not sexy, but I like it.
His hair's got to turn gray sometime, man. It's got to be getting close.
We should do a study on this and see.
Well, I'll look up some information and maybe on next week's episode, I'll see do redheads.
This should be the headline.
Do redheads lose their color of their hair quicker than other hair colors? I'll do some research on that. The other quarterback that played for the Saints last year, Jameis Winston. Laser Jameis, baby. He signed a 1-year agreement worth up to $8 million with the Saints. So he will not be their starting quarterback. It will be Derek Carr. But honestly, I really want it to be Laser Jameis. I'm always a big fan of chaos, and that's what Laser Jameis is. So
is it bad to say that I would rather have Jameis starting than Jimmy G?
No, because at least you're going to have fun. At least you don't know what's going to happen anytime Jameis is back there. And that's what I love about him. So no, I would sympathize with you there. I would agree with you. I would also rather have Jameis because you might throw 4 picks, but you're going to have fun watching it. And versus Jimmy G, he's kind of like a pole that just stands there and tries to do his best. So
and gets hurt.
Yeah. And gets hurt. Yeah. Okay. We've also got Sam Darnold. So the former alma mater of Jimmy G, the 49ers, they signed Sam Darnold to a 1-year deal worth $4.5 million. So there's some speculation. Does this show that the Niners have lost faith in Trey Lance? Are they maybe bulking up at quarterback because of all the issues they had last year? That's the camp that I'm in. And I'm going to tell you right now, Yeti, Trey Lance is the starter for the 49ers. That is my opinion on the entire situation. Yes, Brock Purdy did look really well last year, but Brock Purdy just had surgery. He is not going to be ready for the first couple months of the NFL season. So, I realistically, it's Trey Lance. Trey Lance is going to be the only quarterback at camp other than Sam Darnold at this point that might be worth his eggs. But I'm telling you right now, Trey Lance is a better quarterback than Sam Darnold. And I don't think that should be a surprise to anybody. Granted, we haven't seen a lot of Trey Lance, but from an athletic perspective, I would much rather have Trey Lance back there and give him his due shots. So real quick, Eagles Nation does say Chris Godwin on the Chiefs would look really good. Eagles Nation, I'm going to tell you right now, any wide receiver on the Chiefs right now is probably pretty nice.
Cheat code, man.
That would be a cheat code. So, yeah, I mean, what are your thoughts with the Sam Darnold trade here? I think, like I mentioned, for me, It was more of a depth piece because we saw them struggle at the quarterback position. I don't know where you stand on this.
I agree. It's just a depth signing, honestly, because we've seen guys like Nick Mullen and CJ Beathard come into this offense and they produce. We've seen Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant, come into this offense and produce. So I think you can put literally anybody at quarterback in this offense and they will be productive because they just need to be a game manager. I mean, shit, Jimmy G just made what, $60-70 million from being a quarterback in this offense, and he was a pole back there, like he said. So it's very much a situation to avoid having Christian McCaffrey playing at quarterback like they almost did in the playoffs against the Eagles.
I was honestly, I was like, man, this would be fun because I'm a fan of chaos. But the last quarterback here, the Dolphins, they signed Mike White, baby, the Mike White from the Jets. They signed him to a 2-year deal worth $16 million. I, for one, love this. I really support this. Very obviously, Tua is going to be the starter, but there is a little bit of concern with the concussions and everything that has gone on with Tua from a medical perspective. There is some speculation there. And I think that's a fair speculation to have because the dude had quite a few concussions this last year. There was a couple that were scary, like really scary concussions. So how much longer will he be able to play? Will he able to not obtain any more concussions? And who knows, one more concussion, he could be done here. So Mike White is nothing incredible. He's nothing flashy. We saw what he did with the Jets, and I was a huge fan of it. He threw the ball quite a bit, much more. Well, I say that, but we have Zach Wilson as the standard. So he did a lot more than Zach Wilson. And I like this as a depth piece for the for the Dolphins, excuse me. And with all the weapons they have there, I like the signing of Mike White as the backup. So the running back market is now up to talk about, Yeti, because there have been some free agent running backs that have kind of moved around. So I think the biggest headline, and the one that I jokingly said in our group chat, I said I'd put $1,000 money line
do it
on the Cowboys to win the Super Bowl if they cut Zeke Elliott, not thinking they actually would. And I woke up this morning and looked at my phone, and the Cowboys are releasing Zeke Elliott. I think that was the right move. What do you think?
Yeah, 100%, man. I think we've been calling for it ever since we started this podcast, is that Zeke is not the answer there anymore in Dallas, which is crazy to say because he was, I was thinking back to his time, kind of reminiscing. And when he came out of college, out of Ohio State, like that dude was a freak. Like he's such a talented running back coming out, and he looks so good for the first 3, 4, 5 years with Dallas, and then started just getting old, man. And it was sad to see. But obviously Father Time has kind of caught up to him a little bit, and Tony Pollard is the best back there.
Yeah, I'm wondering, did Jerry Jones, did he take Zeke with him when he went to the Fountain of Youth and they both sipped from the same cup? Because Jerry Jones is still alive, and maybe he thought it would buy Zeke more years when he got him that massive contract. I don't know.
I think so.
It must have been. It was the right move. He was on a massive contract. He was not producing like a massive running back. And like you said, Tony Pollard was the better running back here. I don't know if Tony Pollard will be ready to start the season. So I am interested to see who they bring in as another running back to help, because Tony Pollard, as we know, he tore his ACL and blew his knee. There's a bunch of knee problems there with Tony Pollard, but they signed him, or did they sign him or franchise tag him? I can't remember. I think they
tagged him.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, they tagged him. So he'll be back next year. But they will still need some help at running back. So Zeke,
let me ask you this. Yeah, Zeke, love you. Sorry. Bye. Do you think the Cowboys are going to sign another running back or draft one?
I see what you're doing here. Smells like a Bijan Robinson conversation. That would be good. Honestly, that you look at it because I mean, in our group chat, we've had numerous conversations about where would be the most beneficial spot for Robinson to go. Like, where do we want him to go? This could be a really good spot because they have Pollard on a 1-year deal. If they could get him in the draft, that would kind of be their future guy. So I like that a lot. And that also would excite me because up until this point, Zeke has kind of been the RB1, and they've used him both as a pass catching and a running back in the backfield. So that kind of fits the mold that they're looking for. They want a running back that can be both, and that's definitely Bijan Robinson. So I like that. That would be a fun one for me.
We
I would
certainly know that running backs are like Viagra for Jerry Jones. So I'm sure he's looking at Bajan and he's like, oh, I got to go to a doctor, after releasing Zeke.
I think that would be fun. I do like that. There's some speculation the Buccaneers are interested in Zeke once he is released. That makes me sad. It makes me sad because Rachaad White, he deserves his chance there. We saw, he was kind of taking some snaps away from playoff Lenny. He was looking good. He was doing both that pass catching and the between the tackles role. So if anything, I'd like White to still be the RB1 and Zeke kind of be the RB2 in that offense if it were to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my thought. I don't know.
It would kind of suck to see, I know we shit on Zeke a lot, but it's weird to imagine Zeke in a different uniform because I've always seen him in a Cowboys uniform or an Ohio State uniform. So it would be weird to see him with the Buccaneers or any other team. And, I would kind of want him to go to like a contender, not just kind of dwindle away on the Bucs. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't even know what uniform would look good on Zeke. And that plays a part for me. That's a really big component. Like you got to think. That would be a good one. That would be a good one.
Joe Mixon might be a casualty.
Samaje Perine signed with the Broncos, so that could be a nice spot for him uniform-wise.
You heard it here first. Bengals.
Yep. We're go ahead and just we'll get that tweeted out and
I'll make a graphic.
We'll be Shefty to it. We'll be Shefty to it. The Lions, they signed David Montgomery to a 3-year, $18 million deal. This is something we need to discuss because is DeAndre Swift done? Like, I mean, that's kind of where like this is looking like it could be done. Like DeAndre Swift shares could be. I think now they're definitely kind of dropped significantly. But David Montgomery was the running back, the starting running back for the Bears. We all last year said it should have been Khalil Herbert. I think that was kind of where the Bears were trending, but due to injury, it was kind of a back and forth type situation. Now, very obviously, David Montgomery is the starting running back for the Lions. It looks like.
Yeah, Khalil Herbert, he's going to step in as of right now as the day one starter. I'm not ruling out the possibility of the Bears signing another running back or drafting one. Not necessarily Bajan, but I mean, it's extremely possible that they do look elsewhere just because Herbert, he did get hurt last year. He turns 25 this year and he's on the last year of his rookie deal. So, I mean, he's not like a guaranteed set dynasty piece for you. But he certainly does become more interesting, obviously, without Montgomery. Now, on the flip side, you look at a guy like DeAndre Swift, and I think the writing is kind of on the wall. The whole coaching staff, the whole NFL knows that this guy is made out of glass, and you kind of need to preserve him throughout the season. He's kind of, unfortunately, turning into a third down type of guy. He's turning into like a hurry up offense type of guy at this point, just because he can't
kinda
stay
like
healthy.
McKissick in a way, maybe is a good
kind of, yeah. Unfortunately, and I mean, when Swift is on the field, that dude is electric, and he just can't stay on the field is his issue. We saw Swift's production obviously go down a hell of a lot last year with Jamal Williams. He's probably done with Detroit. Obviously, he's going to go sign off with another team now. But Jamal Williams was extremely productive. And you plug and play David Montgomery into that Jamal Williams type of role this year. And I do think David Montgomery is a significant upgrade from Jamal Williams because he can catch the ball as well. So there might be a little less room for DeAndre Swift. I don't know.
I think that's fair, and I agree with you. I think that is fair to state. And DeAndre Swift, if I have shares of him, maybe look at trying to see what you can get now, because it's either that or you ride it and see if he goes to another team and can find some resurgence, because that's really your only two options, in my opinion. He's now more of a pass catching back because Montgomery is definitely a between the tackles kind of guy. So kind of sucks for Swift owners, but I think the Lions are another team that is really spicy this year. I'm very high on the Lions. I like Montgomery to the Lions. He traditionally has been kind of that bell cow for the Bears. So I like this. But we've also got the Eagles. They signed Rashad Penny to a 1-year deal. You want to talk about a running back that can't stay healthy but is good when he's on the field? There you go. Eagles lost Miles Sanders. He is now a free agent. I'm wondering where he's at. We don't have any news on that at the moment, but that's going to be an interesting candidate as a top tier running back name this offseason. But the biggest name that we need to talk about here is Austin Eckler. So Austin Eckler, he spoke with the Chargers and he wanted to seek a trade because their contract negotiations fell through for a re-signing for him. So he's, exploring trades right now. Over under that he comes back to the Chargers this year, Yeti?
I think they work out a deal. I do think they have to for Justin Herbert's sake. Because this man, Justin Herbert, he is a dump off machine. Unfortunately, his wide receivers can't stay on the field with Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. So his next best option is Austin Eckler or Gerald Everett, who both guys are low average depth of target guys. And without Eckler, this offense looks a lot different, in my opinion. So I think they have to come to terms with Eckler. I don't know. It might be an incentive type of deal. I don't know, but he's been arguably one of the best running backs or one of the most productive running backs in the league for the past 2-3 seasons. And he's been reliable. Knock on wood, he's getting up there in age, but he's been reliable.
Yeah, I think, you look at Austin Eckler, he has been, like you mentioned, reliable. He's used in both assets of the game very, very effectively, both running through the tackles and between the tackles, so to speak, and catching the ball down the field. And I would say more often than not, he's used more as a receiver than he is that between the tackles kind of guy. So I think we're going to see a monumental shift in the NFL as far as in what we're paying running backs. I think, if anything, we're going to see wide receivers start to obtain more money throughout the next couple of years. In running backs, their price is going to come down as far as what they are expected to get, because we know that the shelf life on a running back is a lot less. The tread on the tires wears out a heck of a lot faster. When do his treads come off the tire? Right now he's still doing great, but the Chargers have a lot of needs that are quickly going to need to be filled. Keenan Allen and Mike Williams are both older wide receivers, right? They both struggled to stay healthy this last year. They need to find wide receivers very quickly in the future here to help start to replace those guys. Because Joshua Palmer was fine, but he was not Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. You get rid of Austin Eckler, one of those guys goes down, or both of them, because they did last year. What happens to this offense? Justin Herbert's in a really, really poor situation here. So this team is a team that is aging. And if they don't start making some moves, I don't want to hit the panic alarm on Justin Herbert owners, but I would be looking to sell Justin Herbert in a dynasty format. And I've said that before, because the outlook, and I don't want to take anything away from him because he is a good quarterback, but when you take every weapon away from a quarterback, unless they're Tom Brady, you're going to have some situations that are very difficult to overcome. And for Herbert owners right now, you can still get quite a bit for him, but his offensive situation could look a heck of a lot different. So, I don't want to stray away too far from the Austin Eckler talk, but I do think he comes back. I think he has to come back because, as I mentioned, I don't think teams are really wanting to spend big money on running backs, especially with the amount of free agent running backs that there are this year that are at a high talented level. Like Miles Sanders, for example, he's still a free agent. And Austin Eckler is very clearly better than Miles Sanders. But my point being is there are other teams that can go out and get a free agent running back right now, and they could suffice with what they have. And there's also some good running backs other than Bijan Robinson that are coming in through this draft. What if hear me out. What if Bijan Robinson goes to the Chargers? They trade Austin Eckler, they let him go, and they get Bijan Robinson. I think that would be really spicy. I would like that for Justin Herbert.
100%. Bijan is not only he's going to fucking run you over, but he can catch the ball too. And that's obviously why he's getting such high praise in this draft. But I was just looking at Justin Herbert's career stats, and last year he actually put up the lowest amount of yards per target.
And why is that?
Because it's wide receivers, man.
Exactly.
They can't stay on the fucking field. So last year he averaged 6.9 yards on attempts. That's pretty fucking low, man. So if you get rid of Austin Eckler, you better give him somebody like a McKinnon or someone like a Antonio Gibson or McKissick, one of these pass catching backs, because his first instinct is to dump it off.
And that's what, kudos to him. Better than taking a hit and or running it yourself, because that's not where his skill set lies. He's good at the check down offense and he does it well, but you got to get him some weapons. And if they don't figure out their wide receiver situation, you're going to have a troublesome future.
And they also got rid of their offensive coordinator too. I forget who they replaced him with, but that's another kind of question mark for Justin Herbert going forward.
Sure. Unless they plan on doing something big, I think Eckler's still there, in my opinion. Quickly, we'll move through these other running backs. You got Samaje Perine. He signed a 2-year deal to the Broncos. I like Samaje. I like Samaje as a buy low running back. I don't know if Javonte will be 100% ready and healthy coming into the NFL season next year. Samaje Perine was an absolute stud when he was filling in for Joe Mixon this last year with the Bengals. He was very fantasy relevant. He was doing it all. He was catching. He was running between the tackles. He looked pretty good. So Perine is probably going to start the season for the Broncos, and we'll see how Javonte comes back from his leg injury there. So
real quick, we know that Sean Payton loves his pass catching running backs. So what better running back to target low than Samaje Perine, in my opinion?
Yeah, I think you probably could sneakily get him for a lot cheaper than what he could end up producing for you. So I like Perine quite a bit. The Dolphins, these motherfuckers, they signed both Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson. Why? 2-year, $5.6 million deal for Mostert and a 2-year contract, reportedly right around $8 million for Jeff Wilson. Yeah. I wanted them to get a singular running back. I'm tired of the 2 running back combination back there. It's frustrating for fantasy purposes, but another thing that we're starting to see is more prototypical in the NFL. So kudos to those guys for getting bags. Raheem Mostert still kind of scares me. Jeff Wilson is a little bit more enticing to me than Mostert. I don't know where you lie on that.
I would agree with you. Mostert can't stay on the field.
Yeah, he's getting old. All right, other signings we'll move through very quickly. The Patriots signed Juju Smith-Schuster to a 3-year, $33 million contract. That was surprising that happened today, and I was somewhat surprised by this, solely because Billy Belichick wanted the TikTok boy. That was something I did not necessarily see coming. So, Juju is probably one of the better free agent wide receivers, and that's saying something just given how scarce the wide receiver market is right now. I guess I'm glad, that he got paid. I'm glad he didn't go back to the Chiefs. I will say that.
Yeah. The only thing I want to say about this is they let Jacoby Myers walk for the same exact contract, which doesn't make any sense to me. Like, why not just re-sign Jacoby? Jacoby, who already knows offense.
Yeah, and also is a better wide receiver than Juju, in my opinion.
I would agree with you, and he's less drama too.
Exactly, and that was another thing that I was kind of surprised with, because Juju does carry some drama with him, and he's like, I was surprised that's not the prototypical Patriots way. So that move surprised me. I will be honest there.
Maybe Juju just needs like a dad figure. Maybe that's what it is, because Andy Reid and Kansas City, like, they keep things pretty low key. Bill Belly, he's going to be on his ass right away. Like, give me your phone, fuck off, type of thing, if he tries to speak bad on the Patriot name. So maybe
he just needs like structure and
structure. He
likes someone to whip him back
controlled.
into shape. Yeah. Wide receiver Michael Thomas is staying with the Saints on a 1-year, $10 million deal. At this point, are they basically just, hey, let's just give this guy money to hang out with us? Is that kind of where Michael Thomas is? Because it seems
man. I don't fucking know.
He hasn't played in forever. He was great. He hasn't been great in a while. There was a lot of hope for him going into last season. Once again, he got hurt and he didn't play a whole lot. And so congrats, I guess, Michael Thomas. That ship has sailed for me. I'm not excited about Michael Thomas anymore. Chris Olave would be the guy I would want in that offense. Texans, they signed old Billy Lumber, Robert Woods, to a 2-year, $15 million deal.
It's kind of a lot of money for Robert. Right?
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, but once again, the Texans, they don't have anybody besides Brandon Cooks. John Mechie might play this year. I guess we really haven't heard a whole lot about him. He had cancer this last year, so he was recovering the last I'd heard and doing really well, but I don't know if/when he will be back on the gridiron. And then you got Nico Collins, who was their 2nd-year wide receiver. Then the Texans had a slew of problems, and I don't know if their wide receivers were necessarily one of them. It was more of who's their quarterback, because they didn't even know for a lot of the year. So we'll see. They're going to draft a quarterback with the 2nd overall pick. Robert Woods, I'm not excited about it. And the Chiefs, they replaced free agent Orlando Brown with Jawan Taylor on a 4-year, $80 million deal with 60 guaranteed. So pretty exciting for the Chiefs. Chiefs fans got to be pretty happy with the replacement there, and shoring up that offensive line to help protect Patrick Mahomes. So the last thing, unless you wanted to cover any of this other stuff before we get to the sauce part. Okay. Last thing, one of our members of the Leather Brains team wanted to pose this question to us, Yeti. So you have the 4th pick. You have the 4th overall pick in the NFL. Okay. So we're hypothetically Cardinals and or Raiders here because those are our respective teams. You have the 4th pick, and both Stroud and Young are gone, and you need a quarterback. Okay. So the 2 big name quarterbacks that are still left are Anthony Richardson and Will Levis. What are you taking?
And I have to take a quarterback?
You have to take one of these guys. I know who I'm going to take. So if you'd like me to go first, I'd be more than happy to. But if you have your answer, locked and loaded, roll with it.
We can go on 3 at the same time.
Okay. You ready?
1,
2,
3. Richardson.
Anthony Richardson.
Yep.
Okay. I'm glad we answered that. I think Will Levis is not really enticing to me. Dude has a cannon. Yeah, I will say that he has a great arm. I've scouted all 4 of these quarterbacks. Richardson is really actually very enticing to me, to be completely honest with you. And I know that, you are a little bit more down on Richardson from an athletic perspective. He is so juicy for fantasy football, right? Because that's where I'm thinking first is like, I have the 2nd overall pick in our draft this year. I pretty much get any pick at quarterback. Who do I want? For me, there's still a lot that's involved there. Where's these landing spots? Because that does play a part for me. But Richardson is an athletic freak. Yes, he has a lot of problems. Yes, he has a lot of he needs a lot of coaching and a lot of getting him pointed in the right direction. But from a pure athleticism perspective, he's much better off than Will Levis. Will Levis, to me, he's like I said, he's got a cannon. He struggles to make reads. He is your traditional pocket passer, and he doesn't really move around much in that pocket a whole lot. And those are my concerns. So between them, I would much rather have Richardson, and it sounds like you would as well.
Yeah. And, Alan, he makes a good point here. He put that NFL teams, they literally do this every draft. They talk themselves into taking quarterbacks that nobody thinks will work out. And most of the time, the other people are correct. And most of these guys do end up turning into, one contract and done, and they're off to 5 other teams like Baker Mayfield type of thing.
It's funny you say this because I went and looked at the 1st round quarterbacks since 2017 and actually 2016. I apologize. And it was kind of surprising looking at some of these numbers because like you have Trubisky, he's no longer in the league. He is, but for starting purposes, Carson Wentz was in 16, Paxton Lynch, Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, Josh Rosen, Dwayne Haskins, rest in peace. Jordan Love, we really haven't got to see. Zach Wilson's done. So like, and Mac Jones is kind of a fringe guy. So some of these, these 1st round quarterbacks sometimes are not always the play. And I have a lot of you of course got Mahomes, Deshaun Watson, Trevor Lawrence, those kind of guys too. So there is an inverse to that conversation, but it was just interesting. And I was like, man, I want to go see like what 1st round hits were actually good 1st round hits. And I think a lot of it has to do with the coaching and the landing spot as well.
100%. Like if Richardson is walking into like the Raiders right now, I'm very concerned because 1, Jimmy G is the starter and they are 2 completely different guys.
Yep.
And I don't trust the coaching staff. But if Anthony Richardson, I'm not saying this is going to happen. Let's say he goes to Seattle. I would be much more excited about Anthony Richardson with Seattle because I trust Pete Carroll and that coaching staff to develop him under Geno Smith for 2 to 3 years.
And I love this, but Pete Carroll's not getting any younger either, right? I mean, he's 71 years old. So how much longer is he going to be coaching too? And that's something that I think
that's valid.
But I understand where you're coming from, and I agree with you. I think a lot of these quarterbacks, it depends on where they land because you can take a lot of these, like some of these quarterbacks are not necessarily great quarterbacks, but because, Kyle Shanahan's a wonderful example of that. And I don't want to take anything away from Purdy and Lance, but Kyle Shanahan can get the most out of his quarterback position. He makes the offense easy enough for them to understand. And I think Jimmy Garoppolo is a wonderful example of that. So they don't always have to be incredible. They just have to do a decent job and mentally be able to do some of the things that their coaches are expecting of them. So
Right.
I think landing spot is, you can look at, in the combine's a fun metric. I don't really take a lot of credence in all the combine stuff. It is fun to see like, okay, this guy's fucking quick. This guy's got a cannon. But if you watch any of their game film, you already know a lot of these things to begin with. So it's, can these teams harness the talents that these quarterbacks have? And if they end up in a good spot, then I think more often than not, it's a yes for me.
Yeah. And I took the liberty of recording Anthony Richardson and Will Levis's stats while they were in college. So Anthony Richardson, in 14 career starts, he threw for 2,798 passing yards, 23 touchdowns, 14 picks. So not great. And then last year, Will Levis, he started the whole season, so 13 games, threw for 2,406 passing yards, 19 touchdowns, and 10 picks. So these guys are highly regarded as project guys, and rightfully so. But even in college, they weren't showing anything immaculate with their arm. Even guys who had question marks coming into the NFL, such as Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson, his senior year, he threw for over 3,000 yards, 27 touchdowns, 10 picks. Jalen Hurts, over 3,000 yards, 32 touchdowns, 8 picks. Like, they still showed you something to get you a little excited and show you a little interest in, like, okay, they can do some things with their arms and they're productive. They can make the right reads. But then you have guys like Anthony Richardson and Levis who just weren't productive. And while they are exciting, they are sexy at the combine, right? It's just so hard for me to talk myself into them when I watch their game film and I'm like, holy shit, they look like Mitchell Trubisky, versus like the Patriots, like they just fold under good competition. So I'm very skeptical of both of these guys, and it just goes to show you not to eat all the combine nuggets that you see.
No, I agree with you. And I think that's really great advice to all of our listeners out there or watchers. And we appreciate you guys. But yeah, that's a great advice, especially for those that are like playing dynasty and or redraft. And you get to the point where you're like, okay, what do I want to do for quarterback? Like, very clearly what's going to happen is this: CJ Stroud or Bryce Young is going to go to the Texans. Right? Like, I think that is a fair thing to say. I don't think that's shocking. I think that's probably going to happen. Which one? And so and then at that point, maybe I'm less interested in them because the Texans are kind of have been a shit show the last couple of years, right? Ever since the Deshaun Watson thing went down, like it's been a very rocky road. They have struggles with their coaching staff and the turnover there. So it's year after year. Some of their Brandon Cooks wants out, so there's certainly some negative things there. And so it goes back to me, like I said, I want to see raw talent, and that's what excites me about Richardson. But I also want to make sure, and both Stroud and Young are probably the two most complete. We know that. But where are they going to go? And where are they going to go? And what does their situation look like? Do they have good coaches? Are they going to be coached well? Are they going to be able to grow in the system? So those are my concerns. Choosing between Levis or Richardson, I'm going to take the talent all day because I think Richardson is much more of an athletic freak than Levis. But once again, it's going to go to where they go, and that's kind of be my answer to that. So. Before we get out of here, I do just want to let everybody know, once again, thank you guys for all of you who have tuned in live, and if you are tuning into the podcast. Greatly appreciate it. We appreciate all you Brainiacs out there. We just hit 15,000 followers on Twitter, so it was a huge milestone for us, and we're super excited to let's go to 20, baby. Let's keep growing. But let's not forget about March Gladness now, because we're giving away free signed NFL jerseys this week. All you got to do, if you're not already, make sure that you are subscribed to us on our YouTube channel, and then just retweet our pinned tweet on Twitter. So Leatherbrains with a Z. If you're listening to us, you already know. Go follow us on Twitter. Make sure you're subscribed to us. And next week, we're giving away another jersey. So it is a free signed NFL jersey. And just make sure that you have our notifications on so you don't miss it, because we want to make sure that we are getting you guys some fun, free jerseys. So we appreciate it. We appreciate Yeti. I appreciate you coming on today. It was a wonderful conversation, and I cannot wait to do it again next Wednesday, baby.
Let's do it, baby.
All right, let's get out of here. We
are
out.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leather Brains. If you enjoyed the show, please consider subscribing and leaving a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast app and YouTube, as well as following us at Leatherbrains on Twitter and Instagram. If you're looking for specific fantasy advice, including draft advice, trade insight, starts and sits, or even if you want our thoughts on your sports bets, please feel free to send us a DM on Twitter for an answer and a chance to have your question featured on a future episode. Again, thank you for tuning in, and we'll be back before you know it.